Welcome to Growing Startups, where we talk to growth leaders and marketing professionals about how to drive sustainable growth from the ground up. I'm your host, Evelyn Cools, and I lead marketing for tech startups. I'm excited to share these candid conversations about marketing, culture, collaboration, and everything else that makes startups grow. I'm joined today by Morgan Abreu, and she is, like me, a fractional go-to-market leader, but she specializes in the sales side of things, also for early stage startups. So I'm just very excited to have this conversation because I feel like the marketing and sales relationship is so interesting and can really make or break a startup, in my opinion. So we're going to get into all of the things, but before we do, I'd love, Morgan, for you to give us a quick overview of your background and what you're doing right now.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for having me. My background has been in sales for the past 10 years, and I've been building sales teams from day one. So I started my career as an inside sales rep that came in with no sort of generational knowledge. The company I'd worked for had come in and basically cleaned house of all sales reps. So handed me a computer and said, figure it out. So I started working in that sort of capacity, making cold calls, making email sequences, and figuring out what worked, what didn't work really in real time. So after I left that position, I moved into a consulting role where I was helping early stage startups work with the federal government. So any sort of three-letter organization, I was helping them determine a business development plan to win those contracts and get on like programs of record for the government. So whether I was working directly for a company and their sales process or was helping a myriad of different startups in a ton of different industries, I was always working on sales process implementation, business development implementation, really from companies as small as one or two people working there, to as large as like Fortune, like 100 companies, were part of my client base.
This podcast is brought to you by Evelyn Cools Marketing. If you're an early stage B2B tech founder who wants marketing to actually work, you're in the right place. As a fractional head of marketing and growth advisor, I help early stage B2B startups take marketing from 0 to 1 by building the foundations, testing different channels, and scaling what works. I'm currently offering a free strategy call where I do an audit of what you've tried with marketing so far and share practical advice that I believe will make the biggest impact on your growth engine. Visit evelyncools.com to book your free strategy call today. Now back to the episode. That's super cool. And did you now transition out of that space, or because I feel like we also work in a similar industry like B2B tech, but I'm curious if you've like niched down at all.
Yeah, so now in my fractional business, I don't have a niche specifically for the type of business, but more the type of problem. So what I do is I help early stage founders transition away from being the person running the sales process and into a full-time head of sales or full-time sales hire. Sales is typically the most expensive person to hire within the company, and it also has the highest rate of failure within a company as well. So making sure that all of the processes are in place prior to bringing them on is really the crux of what I do.
Such an important piece, I feel like. Such like a big part of the growing pains of startups. So I'm excited to get into that. But before we do, I'd love to ask you a question that I ask every guest at the beginning, which is what is something that you do, a wellness practice or ritual to help you stay sane in the crazy sales startup world?
Yeah. So my favorite thing to do every morning is like settle my house is how I describe it. So my husband and I have like night shift and morning shift is what we jokingly refer to it as. He loads up the dishwasher, makes sure that like all the animals are settled for the night. And then the next morning I come downstairs, wipe down all the counters, unload the dishwasher, make my coffee, listen to my morning podcast, like feed the animals and just like open up the house for the day. And it creates a space where, especially when we're working from home, there is a space that's organized and settled at all points and that I can step away from the craziness of my computer and into the calm of my living room and my kitchen.
I love this. I haven't heard anyone, I feel like we get some common themes on the podcast, and a lot of it has to do around movement or having like a journaling or meditation practice, but I haven't heard anyone say this, and it is such an important part of starting your day, at least for me as well. So when I don't have like a clean house, I don't have a clean mind, I can't, working from home, I'm like,
100%.
nope, can't walk through here and see all this mess and then like do my best work. So I love that you said that.
Yeah, and especially being in a house, like, as small as my husband and I are in as well, like, if anything is out of place to me, like, it just makes me wanna go clean that up and focus on that versus actually working on the work that I want to be doing. I call it my productive procrastination because, like, doing the dishes, not necessarily a bad thing to be doing, but, like, where should that energy and that mental space be put? And so when everything's clean and organized, then I'm good to go.
Okay, I'm going to draw a parallel between cleaning house physically in your house and then at startups with the sales process, because I feel
Love it.
like that's a big part of what you do, right? So
Yeah.
you mentioned you mentioned helping founders transition from founder-led sales where they're really owning the whole process to bringing in your first like salesperson, whether it's a head of sales or like a rep. So maybe we'll start at, where do you see this usually being a need? Like, at what point do you feel like the founder doing sales just isn't sustainable for scaling the company?
Yeah, when the founder is the one who's running the sales process, they're in a really interesting position because they can say yes to everything that they want. They have complete decision-making control. And when we're thinking about it from a sales process, when you're selling into a company, you want to find that ultimate decision maker. So a lot of the times, the founder or the C-suite of a company is the one that's getting pulled into sales conversations because they're the ones that get the ultimate say so. They get to say, we are going to build out this new widget, or we are going to go after this discount program, or whatever that may be. They get to have that golden ticket to say yes. But what happens is that when the sales process is completely owned by the founder then is part of prospecting. The founder is a part of the cold outreach. They're a part of those entry level sales calls. They're a part of literally everything. And there's a reason why sales teams are some of the biggest within like large companies is because it takes a lot of time to do all of those things well and to make sure that all of the balls stay in the air and nothing gets dropped. So when a founder is running that and also trying to build the company out, something gets dropped. And so sales is something that you can outsource and you can train with a team where you still get to drive that creative engine and you still get to be the one that's making the decisions about how the company continues to move forward without having to be a part of that day-to-day process.
That's such an interesting take. I mean, I feel like it can go really well having like they're in the beginning. It is good for the founder to be in it because they're still figuring out their business. So I think it's good for them to like be actually like on the front lines in a way. But yeah, like you said as well, I mean, outside of the time, I feel like they can say yes to a lot of things, which isn't necessarily always in the best interest of the company, like adding all these features. And maybe they're like hearing this from one client, whereas, that's like the only person that actually requested this. So I feel like, getting in the weeds isn't always super helpful either without having that like outside person who is just focused on sales. Same thing with a marketer, I think, who like understands the audience, like the ICP, who are we actually going after? Do these prospects actually fit into that? Should we be even taking them on as clients? So I feel like there's so many places where this can either go well or at some point also like kind of become chaotic for the company as a whole.
Yeah, and what I see is founders, when they don't have processes in place before making that hire, will make one of two mistakes. They'll either hire someone who's really, really senior and has like fabulous logos on their resume or things that make it look really flashy and really perfect, but they've hired too senior too quickly without being able to tell them the path in which the company wants to grow and wants to develop. Or they'll make the exact opposite decision and hire someone way too junior and that doesn't know how to run a sales cycle, doesn't know how to run a sales process. But because the founder hasn't spent the time to actually create a process to be able to teach either the high level sales hire or the junior level sales hire, there isn't anything to be able to pass over to them to show what works, what doesn't. And so the founder is still deeply, deeply ingrained in the sales process, even though they've made that hire and they're paying someone to come in and do that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Do you feel like outside of kind of seniority, there are other things that founders should be thinking about, whether it's like soft skills, or do you feel like you've worked with massive companies and also, the smallest teams? Do you feel like you need to find a salesperson who knows your size or your stage, or is that not as relevant?
Personality is a way bigger factor than knowing the stage or knowing even the product, I would argue, because knowing the product itself can be taught and knowing the space can be taught. But if the personalities don't mesh, especially with small stage startups that have really intimate teams, it can create this competition that isn't healthy within the team and it can turn toxic really quickly. Because sales reps, I mean, also include myself in this, we're known for being competitive. We're known for like wanting to push to be the best or be better and continue to grow and learn. But if you hire a sales rep that has a personality that's willing to do anything to get to the top, what does that mean for growing out the team at large? Are they going to are they going to hide deals from more junior reps that you wanted them to train? Are they going to be open with the process flows that have worked for them? It creates a secretive kind of old used car salesman vibe within the sales org versus coming from a place of abundance and coming from a place of when I win, everyone wins. And that to me is the secret sauce for a sales org, is a team that supports each other and teaches each other.
Yeah, I do feel like personality is specifically for sales the one thing that I've seen either go really well for small teams or really badly, maybe more so than any other role. I don't know exactly why. Maybe it's because they're like, I don't know, they're just like always moving, always going fast. Like they're the ones representing the product externally. There's like all these
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, definitely a different breed. And also personality doesn't mean that that person has to be your best friend. It just means that they have to come from a place of wanting to learn and wanting to grow. There's this term in sales of like the hungry sales rep. And I think that that is the opposite of what you need to be hiring. I think there's a little bit of like hunger when it comes to learning that would be great, but it's more about curiosity than it is about hunger. Because hunger to me is who do I have to push out of the way to make sure
Kind of
that I make it
predatory.
to the top? Yeah, it's predatory. That's a great way to describe it. Where if you're learning and curious, then you're going to have those conversations with people to figure out what they're doing that's working, that what maybe you need to update and change. And it comes from a place of being really humble to figure out how can you improve the process.
Yep. So if founders are listening right now that are thinking about getting out of the day to day sales process and bringing on their first full time hire, for one, I think what you do is interesting. So I'd love to kind of hear your take on bringing in someone fractional potentially to like help set things up for this person to be successful. But I'd love to hear that in conjunction with like what fundamentals do you feel like need to be in place before you actually hire someone full time?
Absolutely. Before you actually transition into that full-time sales hire, you need to make sure that you have a sales process and not some scribbles on a like a bar napkin of what you do. Like you need to make sure that you have that ICP really ironed out. Even if it's not perfect, that's okay. You can tweak that, you can continue to change that. That's going to grow and change as you develop out your business. But you need to have one at least defined to be able to test, and you need to have tested more than one. as the founder before you bring on an external sales hire. You need to figure out where your ICP lives. You need to know, are they in emails? Are they on LinkedIn? Are they answering phone calls? Are they at conferences? Figuring out what that looks like for you is really important. And then you need to have a playbook in place. What does that sales process look like internally? Who needs to be involved in decision making? Who needs to be involved at what stage? And really importantly, who has the ability to say yes to what levers in the sales process? So, with that new sales hire, what we were talking about earlier is the founder has the ability to say yes to anything and everything. That new sales hire is not going to have that ability, but are there things that you're going to give them leeway to doing? Like, are you going to be able to give them 10% off or some sort of discount? Are they going to be able to say yes to certain features being built out? And you also need to very clearly define when the founder needs to be brought into the conversation, or what's going to happen is you're going to land right back into founder-led sales, where the founder is the one who is ultimately making all of the decisions, and you have essentially hired an expensive cold caller.
That happens way too much.
Yep, it definitely
Okay,
does.
I have a question because what you said about like going back to, the salesperson isn't going to be able to approve features and they just have a little bit less autonomy than the founder would.
Mhm.
This just made me think of something that I feel like every single early stage startup, I'm like the middleman in this conversation of like maybe the founder wants to push a new product that doesn't exist yet. And then I have to be the one to figure out, like, okay, should we be marketing this yet? And then the salesperson is like, I don't know how I demo this. Like, when is it going to
Mhm.
be ready? Like, can I even sell this? So I don't know. This just like popped into my mind. How do you feel about selling something that doesn't exist yet?
It's not my favorite, but I also understand that in startup land, sometimes it's gotta happen and you've gotta do what you've gotta do to make that next sale, to be able to have that proof of concept, to be able to actually develop that out fully. One thing that I like is actually getting the customer more involved in the process if you are building it out specifically for a specific demographic of customer. So when you have that ICP really clearly defined, specifically for features, you can say like, okay, hey, Evelyn, you're my ICP. This honestly is not completely done yet. Would you be willing to work with me to help me and give me feedback in real time so we get this developed out to where you're really happy with the final product, but then we also get the feedback in real time? When you're open and honest about what stage you're at, you're going to get great feedback and you're going to be able to continue to develop without feeling like you're building the plane while flying it, even though, like, we all know that that's what happens in startups.
I really like that because I feel like salespeople are often under this pressure to like sell stuff for sales sake and not really having the room to be honest about these things. So I actually really this just kind of comes back to building trust as well, which I think is so important with marketing and also involving your audience. Like just we're all humans, we're all like creating things from scratch where nothing's perfect. So I think this is just an interesting like way to turn that around, that it's okay to be honest about things sometimes, even as a salesperson.
And people buy things from people they like, especially in the age of AI right now, where we're all getting bombarded with messaging that you can tell was not written by a real human being. Having a human, honest conversation, I feel like that's the word of this podcast today, is just honest and learning. But truly, people want to work with people that they like, and people like honesty from the people that they want to work with. If you think about the trope of the used car salesman, it's because you feel like you're being swindled, you feel like you're being lied to, you're trying to figure out what they're hiding. But if you flip that script upside down and come to the prospect, you come to the potential client, whatever it is that you're calling it in your industry, and say, hey, I'm going to level with you. This is where we're truly at. People respond to that. People respond to that really well. And you're going to build longer term relationships, it may be a no right now. But because you were open with them now, it might be a yes 6 months down the line when that feature is built out because somebody else was willing to work with you on it.
I love that so much. And I feel like it just extends to everything that we do these days, right? Is just kind of like cutting through all the fake stuff that's out there.
Absolutely.
Okay, I want to take it back a little bit to the fundamentals that you were talking about because I feel like obviously, as you mentioned as well, and as all of us know, founders are like some of the busiest people in the world. And the whole reason they're outsourcing this now is to take work off of their plate and to make things run smoother, whether they're wanting to focus on another part of the business or they're fundraising or whatever, other things that they have on their mind. But putting all of these fundamentals in place, I feel like also takes a lot of time, whether it's like setting up your CRM or recording videos to like put together a playbook. So I think what you do is so interesting because you really come in as like not the investment of a full-time hire, but someone who can kind of set up sales from 0 to 1, similar to what I do for marketing. And then when they do bring on that full-time person, everything's already in place for them to actually, hit the ground running. So I'd love to hear a little bit from you about like where you feel like fractional sales leadership fits in.
Yeah, I would say that fractional sales leadership is very different than bringing on a full-time sales hire. For me specifically, when I go into a company, I'm not the one that's doing the cold calls. I'm not the one doing outreach. I'm not the one running the sales cycle. And that's very important because I'm not going to be there permanently. I'm there to help you figure out what's working and what's not working from a third party perspective and help you get that sales hire like hit the ground running and really trained up so that you don't have to be involved in that sales process as deeply as you were. And you're also not going to be responsible for training that new hire. So, with a 12-month engagement with like me as a fractional, for example, is I'll come in, help you build out that playbook, help you with the hiring process to vet out to make sure that personality is going to be a perfect fit for you and the team over the relationship that I've built with you guys. And then from there, help that new hire get trained and onboarded to the sales process that we developed together. So that way, at the end of the 12-month engagement, you're really excited and confident with that hire and that they are able to fully run the sales cycle autonomously.
That's awesome. Yeah, I feel like it's hard, especially for founders who don't have a sales or a marketing background, to actually like know who to hire and how to set them up for success. So, yeah, there's like I always like to say you're ready for whether it's like a sales hire or a marketing hire or a head of product, whatever it is, once you, as the founder, become the bottleneck in that area. And I feel like that also extends to then if you do hire, like making sure that person is actually going to be successful. So I think it's such a cool bridge to have fractional people like us being just more and more common. I feel like this is only in the last couple of years that I've really seen like a surge of fractionals. So yeah, just I think very cool to see. And I haven't met a lot of fractional sales leaders, so just happy to have you here.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to be here and talk with you about it because I think there's such a difference between hiring someone part-time to do that sort of cold call outreach. I'm not your girl for that. That's not what you want to hire me for because while I can go and do it, that doesn't solve any of the institutional problems that are happening when the founder is the bottleneck. Exactly what you were talking about. Once that founder becomes the bottleneck, it's when it's time to really make sure that you have things like codified in a playbook so that you can pass things on to new hires coming in. But if I'm the one that comes in and starts doing the cold calling and I'm not here permanently, then that's really confusing for your customers because, hey, this is Morgan from fill in the blank startup. Fast forward a couple months, you're talking to that new potential customer, "Hey, where did Morgan go? Like, where is she now?" It creates a lack of continuity in the sales cycle for the customer.
It's a really good point. I actually hadn't thought about that because it's a little bit less important for other fractionals. So that is interesting. Maybe customer success as well. I have seen a lot more fractional CS leaders as well, which I think kind of a similar idea.
Yeah, I would agree. And there's all sorts of different ways that people set up their fractional businesses where they do either want to be in there long term but just not full time, or they have set engagements. But for me specifically, that set engagement window is really important because I want you to be able to thrive by yourself. Like I don't want to be here permanently because I'm here to set you up for success and then let you fly.
Makes total sense. I want to talk a little bit about the broader go to market team because I feel like the marketing and sales relationship can be really, really good or really disconnected. So I'm curious, maybe to start, like, what's your relationship been so far with marketers?
I love my marketing counterparts. I know that it can be a little bit of a hot take from sales and marketing having this ongoing feud for whatever reason. When I have noticed that there is misalignment between sales and marketing, it's because we're being given different directives from whether it's higher up or wherever that may be. And those different directives lead to different outcomes. So if you, as the marketer, are being told we need to go after this one specific type of person, but then me in sales is working a playbook to help the sales team go after this completely different type of person. Any sort of leads you send me are going to be completely disconnected from what we're traditionally pitching, or any sort of marketing like collateral that's being developed is not going to be helpful for the type of person that sales is doing outreach for. So unless there is complete alignment between sales and marketing, it can cause major issues with pipeline. It can cause major issues with just resource allocation, resource development. You'd be swimming in completely different directions.
Yeah, it can be so frustrating. I think for both sides, you just like need each other to be successful. And I've definitely been in the situation where, I'm sending a good amount of leads, but there's just such a disconnect between marketing and sales that I don't even know what's working. Like, am I actually bringing in the right people, or is it just like sales that's not on the same page? So I feel like you just don't learn as well, which is such an important thing at early stage startups because time is money more than at huge companies. So, yeah, I'm glad that you like marketers because I've met a lot of salespeople that just think we kind of suck. I don't know.
Listen, I would much rather be on the phone talking to people and like diagnosing problems, figuring out how we can come to solutions together than making a pitch deck. And there have been so many times where I have been in situations where sales and marketing are not aligned in teams that I'm working as the rep for. And I'm up making a pitch deck, trying to copy and paste or screenshot different things out of whatever was created by marketing. And I know that all of my marketing friends are gonna be rolling over in their graves trying to be like, why are you doing that?" I can see the cringe on your face, but it's the truth, and it is reality. When the alignment is not there, sales will try to create solutions with the resources they've been provided to actually communicate with their ICP or communicate with the people that they're actually on the phone with because they want the sale. And marketing has to go and create the things that marketing is being asked to do because that's their job. And so if they're not aligned, then we're both just like spinning in circles.
I've seen the craziest hacked together like proposals or pitch decks where I'm like, where did you even get this? Like it's some kind of crazy like old logo or a customer quote that I didn't even know existed. I'm like, good for you. You're finding the stuff.
Yeah, and I actually you're gonna hate when I say this, but I actually really like when I see things like that happening within companies because I think it is a clear picture of where a problem exists. And when people try to skirt around existing process flows to find solutions, or they're using existing solutions in ways they weren't intended to be used, then that's a clear indication that something is wrong and that something needs to be at least updated or looked at. So those are really bright neon signs that there's a problem that needs to be diagnosed.
I actually agree with you. And I also think it's good because it means, for one, you actually like care about your job and you're like trying to, do better. So that's one thing. But then also you're actually learning what works with the target audience, which is something that marketing doesn't have the same kind of direct access to. So all I want from like the salesperson is to tell me, hey, this kind of messaging has been really resonating, or I've like put together this pitch deck that looks crazy, but can you give me a version that like is very brand aligned and looks better? Like I love that. So I think we're actually on the same page with this.
Yeah, exactly. And it goes back once again to what we were talking about earlier. Personality matters so much because that sales hire needs to check their ego at the door and be able to walk over to marketing or Slack them or whatever, the virtual version of walk over to them and say, this is what I'm seeing. This is what I'm hearing. How can we make this better as a team? How can we align this better as a team? Or what am I not seeing that you're producing that might already exist that I just don't know about? Because a lot of times marketing has these beautiful folders that are hidden deep within the G drive or whatever software that's being used. And you're just like, oh, I didn't know that existed. That's exactly what I needed.
So many folders and so many tabs. I guilty as charged.
Listen, I love a folder, I love a tab, but not as much as a marketing person. I'll tell you that right now.
It's so funny. Well, I think this is a good example of where moving fast is super helpful, and that quick communication, like, if sales need something like, and it's, they're working a deal, let's just get it to them quick, make fast changes. But something else that we've talked about in the past is when quick pivots or like changing our strategy every single week, like this is the new KPI, can be super frustrating and detrimental for everyone. But I think especially for sales, because you're being put in a situation where, okay, all of a sudden we have this new direction, and like today I have 3 sales calls, and now I'm supposed to just like all of a sudden change my entire strategy. So I'd love to hear a little bit about like what your experience with that is and what you recommend to keep
Yes.
sales happy.
Thank you for asking. I love it when we're trying to keep sales happy. No, but I think it's a really important thing to talk about because founders and any sales org, whether it's really small or is one of the biggest ones that I've worked with, things change, things pivot, and that's what it has to do. It has to continue to grow and has to continue to evolve. But when that information gets trickled down to reps, let's say we're talking about an SVP that's then telling a VP, that's then telling a manager, that's then telling a team worth of people, that information might get all the way passed through within an hour. It might move really quickly, or it might take a couple of days to get all the way down to the reps that are actually doing things. But if every single day you're logging on and there's a new KPI that's put in place, or there's the new most important thing to be doing that's put in place. You can't build momentum. And sales is, in some ways, a little bit of magic that happens, but a lot of momentum. So if you're not putting things in place today for what's going to happen 3 weeks from now, you're not going to get those outcomes 3 weeks from now. So if the KPI today is to make 10 cold calls in one specific like ICP, and then tomorrow is a completely different ICP, or they want you to send 30 emails, how am I going to continue to follow up with those people from the day before in a way that is meaningful and effective and relationship building? And what you can get even before AI was as big as it is now, is you can get a whole lot of slop. You can get fast emails that are sent out with like, "Hey, insert first name," information that isn't relevant to this person at all. "Thanks, Morgan," because you sent out those 30 emails and you get to check that box. So when you're measuring for success, making sure that what you're putting forward as the metric of success is something that truly drives success and is not a checkbox. Because that's one reason I love monthly quotas or quarterly quotas for sales, depending on sales cycles. And I know that that's not always the most popular opinion about, like with reps, because it's hard. You have to hit this number. But if you use that quota as your guiding light and your driving force, you can reverse engineer almost everything that you do. If I need to make a sale, it took me 3 calls with that client to actually make the sale. It took me 10 cold calls to get that one meeting. It took me 3 hours to make those 10 cold calls effectively. You know a formula, a mathematical formula that you can spend the time to get the results and use that as your guiding light. This was a really long, rambly way of saying, make sure that when you're communicating to your reps, it is driven by success versus the frantic, sometimes stressed responses from senior leadership because they have different pressures on them. And that can get translated and actually amplified as it moves from down the chain of communication to the reps that are actually client facing.
Absolutely. I just want to like press the plus button on that a couple times because I mean, just like getting on Monday morning and seeing maybe a recorded loom over the weekend from the founder on like this entirely new strategy and just being like, okay, like I don't even know where to start. And if you, as one of the leaders in your department, whether it's sales, marketing, product, whatever, you can't then be clear with the people under you as well. So, yeah, it's just the stress does amplify, and it is so dictated by the founders because they're setting the tone for everything. So, I think it's just, a good thing to remember that obviously like you need your trusted people. You need, your top like 4 or 5 whatever. Everyone should like know what you're thinking, but then how you communicate it to the team has such a big impact on like the work that actually gets done week over week.
Absolutely. And when I was managing a team of people full time, it was so important to me to make sure that I took a beat when a directive was given to me before I articulated it back to them. Not so that they didn't have the information about what was going on in senior leadership, but that I was able to articulate it to them in a way that was not going to cause an undue amount of stress, and that I was able to sit with what was the actual goal or priority from the directive that was being given. Like, where was the hidden meaning behind it so that we could set ourselves up for success? Because when everything is on fire and everything is a priority, nothing is truly a priority.
I'm just thinking about that meme and maybe we'll insert it here of the like dog in the house on fire.
Like, hanging
Everything's
out,
fine.
everything's fine. Yeah.
One last thing I really want to touch on, kind of in this topic as well, especially when you're hiring like SDRs, for example, I feel like they kind of operate separate from the team in many ways just because the nature of their job, right? Like they're cold calling, they're writing a bunch of emails, they might not be on all the meetings that other people are on. So I feel like it can be pretty easy for those sales, especially the new hires, to kind of like get in a silo a little bit and not feel as connected to the organization as the other teams. So, from your perspective, how important do you feel like it is to like bridge that connection, make sure they're actually like, involved in the decision making or at least like have the right context for their success?
Yeah. In terms of being involved in the decision making, that goes back to that playbook that has to be determined before you even bring that person on. Because once you bring on an SDR and you build a relationship with them, obviously things are going to change a little bit from what you maybe envisioned originally. But what you don't want to happen is then put a ton of things on their plate that are going to be outside of what they were hired to do, because then you're not going to actually get the result that you wanted from hiring that person. You have completely changed the scope of their role. And if it comes a point where they do get to that point, or if you get to a point where that becomes more relevant, great. Then you already know you need to hire another SDR. But when that is in place beforehand, you know what their role is going to be. You know what sorts of meetings they'll be involved in. You'll know all of that before they're brought on, so that, to get back to really your original question, you're able to give them really clear lateral limits, and then they know how to operate and know how to interact with people. They can build those relationships genuinely. And I've worked in a remote environment for like almost 8.5 years now. And building remote teams is inherently very different than building like in person teams. And it can be as simple as like a silly little weekly email you send with a picture that of what everyone did the previous weekend, that builds a sense of rapport within the team without an overshare.
I actually love that as like closing advice because I do feel like there's still a lot of remote companies. The work we do as fractionals is usually remote. So, yeah, just kind of going back to we're all human. Like, we have to feel connected to the vision of the company and the people that we work with to like stay motivated and keep wanting to show up for work every single day. So, I love that as like a closing point.
Well, yeah, I sent at my previous company and the team that I was managing, every Wednesday we would send a picture and what we called it our Wednesday sunshine email. And it was nothing that was like crazy. It was like, here's my coffee that made me really happy, or here's a like flowers that I saw, or here's a picture of my dog, or like just little things. Like, you don't have to add this part into the podcast, but like I'm a chronic oversharer. Like I want to tell everyone everything about my life because I just love building connections with people. And I think telling things about yourself is what helps build relationships. And so it gave me left and right lateral limits of like, okay, you can tell the team of people that you manage this one thing about yourself this week. And it compounds on itself and it's great.
Well, I think that's part of why you're also a great salesperson is because the oversharing piece, like people feel comfortable when you share personal things about yourself. So
Yes.
I think it's
Yes,
actually
they do.
a positive.
Okay, great.
Well, speaking of oversharing, because we're definitely keeping that part in,
Great. That's fine.
I want to know a little bit about you. We focus so much on like the sales process and growing startups. So I want to take it back for my final question to something that you're excited about, both in your personal and in your professional life right now.
Yeah, I think right now, like personally, I'm really excited about like designing a life that I want outside of the corporate American norms, and being able to say, like, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to build, this is how I want to put my energy towards other people. Because I feel like everyone has so many things to share, but if we're put into these positions where we're not being able to share what we're good at or what we thrive in, then everyone suffers. So I'm really excited to be able to do what I'm really good at full time for a ton of people. So building out like my client base and being able to work with my clients is something that I've been dreaming about for like years now. So to officially be in my phase of life that I'm doing that is really exciting. And then personally, it's whale season in Hawaii. And that sounds really silly, but like I grew up wanting to be a marine biologist when I was little. So like living on Oahu has been fabulous because like my afternoons are filled with just playing in the water and scuba diving, and we're gonna fly to Maui to hopefully catch a glimpse of the whales underwater while we're over there for breeding season.
That sounds amazing, and I'm a little jealous because I miss the ocean tremendously. So you'll have to send like pictures and stuff because I need to live
Yes.
vicariously through you.
Yes, I'll happily send pictures. It's one of my favorite things. Like, I do not take beautiful pictures underwater. Some of our friends are, like, underwater photographers that are just, like, incredible, but it's, like, me and my little GoPro I'll have out every once in a while just to be like, "Oh, look at this cool shell that's still alive that I'm not gonna take with me." But now I have a picture of it, and that's all I needed.
I love it so much. Morgan, this was such a pleasure having you on. I am so happy that I got to talk to a salesperson. This is the first sales leader on the podcast, so I think that's pretty cool. And I just wanted to ask one last thing, which is where can people connect with you?
Yeah. So right now, the best place to be able to find me is on LinkedIn. So my name is Morgan Abreu on LinkedIn. And other than that, you feel free to shoot me an email at mabrew@meliastrategy.com. Happy to answer like any questions or just hop on strategy calls with people to be able to talk through what's going on and see if there's a way for me to be able to help.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here, for all your insights, and for your time.
Yes, thank you so much. This was fun.
Thanks for listening to Growing Startups. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to give us a rating so more people can find the show. So happy you're here, and see you in the next one.